I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. Deputy City Recorder, please call roll.
Councilor Loop,
Here.
Councilor Anderson,
Here.
Mayor Schneider,
Here.
Youth Councilor Turley,
Here.
Council President Goodhouse,
Here.
Councilor Newton.
All right, all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, staff or council, any non-agenda items? All right. I'll move on to public comment. City Manager Wine, any follow-up to previous public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I see no one signed up. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak that is a member of the public? I don't see any out there. Okay. Let's move on to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Anyone may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Tonight we're considering approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Metro for Urban Reserve Concept Planning Grant Award, and also considering approval of a lease agreement for Hunziker property with Smith Garrig Western Properties LLC. Is there a motion?
I move for the adoption of the consent agenda as presented.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously. Item number 4, consider a resolution authorizing staff to apply for the 2020 Community-Oriented Policing Services Hiring Grant. Chief McAlpine, good to see you.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you. I am here before you to seek approval of a resolution that authorizes the application of the 2020 COPS grant for 2 FTE police officers, and to authorize the city manager to accept the grant, acknowledging that the city must adhere to grant requirements necessary to meet all match funding and supplantation requirements. So with that said, a little bit of information. As you all are aware, the U.S. Department of Justice, or DOJ, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, also known as the COPS Office, is accepting grant applications for the 2020 COPS hiring, and it closes on March 11th. And I believe there's about $400 million this year allocated. And they have been closed for the last 2 years, so this is our first opportunity in the last couple years. And again, they have 26 years of history of helping cities and police agencies all over the country add officers to their force. The city's application will be for 2 officers assigned to patrol division to specifically address quality of life problems and response to emergency calls for service. The patrol officers work directly and strategically with neighbor landlords, property managers, inspectors, small business owners, mental health workers, and other community organizations to address quality of life and nuisance issues within their assigned districts. And again, what we're hoping to gain for our 2 officers is still to respond more quickly to emergency calls for service, to improve our service quality with more officers available to focus on neighborhood concerns, strengthen community relationships and partners, and increase police visibility. Now, the one thing you might ask is, as you know, on the levy, we're asking for 9 officers, so why are we not asking for 9 in the COPS grant? And this is a reminder that the COPS grant only pays 75%, and then we match the 25% with a guarantee commitment of the 4th year that we pay it in full. And so, as you can see, I think in your packet, just to do 2 officers, we estimate that our total would be about $687,700, with COPS providing $250,000. That's the total. I'm sorry. COPS would be $250,000, and the city match would be $437,700. And so, in year 4, the total estimate cost would be $271,000 that would come out of city funds. So again, one, if we were even competitive to ask for the 9 officers, it would be a significant impact to our general. Have to come up with the matching and also that fourth-year commitment. So again, I feel that 2 officers is competitive. In the past, we have not been very competitive because generally we don't have the violent crimes or some of the other criteria. However, we believe with our several years' history of fiscal constraints that we may at least have a compelling argument that we would present forward. So again, before I ask for approval, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on this grant.
Questions? Counselor Lube?
You said that you've applied for this previously and we've been unsuccessful. How often have we applied for it?
I believe it has been possibly well over 10 years, so I mean a significant time. Has it been longer? Thank you.
We applied 3 years ago. We've applied twice in the last 6 years.
Okay, before my time, I'll say that.
Okay.
But
thank you.
not been successful.
That's true.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Counselor Newton?
Chief, I appreciate us, with the challenge we have on staffing. I appreciate your staff putting together this application because though it doesn't cover the full cost, it will cover part of the cost of these badly needed officers. So I appreciate the work that went into this. So thanks.
Thank you.
Counselor Turley or Council President Goodhouse? Nothing? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 20-09.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution 20-09, a resolution authorizing staff to apply for the 2020 Community-Oriented Policing Services COPS hiring grant.
All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution number 20-09 is adopted unanimously. Thank you, Chief. We'll move on to item number 5, receive a briefing on the Southwest Corridor Transit-Oriented Development. Mr. Purdy and Ms. Shanks.
I think she could have been closer.
Good to see both of you.
Could pick it up just a little bit, like these are much louder. Okay.
Now it's green, now we're on. It's good to be here. I have 2 presentations or updates for you tonight. The first one is regarding transit-oriented development, and I'm here with my colleague, our senior planner, Susan Shanks. I want to let you know about TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, and the fact that staff is developing a project to encourage transit-oriented development around light rail stations in Tigard that's consistent, and it would be consistent with the city's strategic vision to be the most walkable community in the Pacific Northwest, where people of all ages and abilities lead healthy and interconnected lives. I'm also confident that this strategy that I will tell you a little bit more about would be consistent with any vision that is being refreshed. I know for a fact it's lining up with what we're trying to do with TOD. Transit-oriented development focuses dense, mixed-use development within walking distance of transit stations. If done correctly, benefits include increased transit ridership, reduced regional congestion, reduced pollution, healthier, more walkable neighborhoods, as well as reduction in transportation costs for households. So staff have proposed a partnership with TriMet that we expect to achieve the following goals. The goals of advancing the city's economic development and affordable housing priorities, realizing the city's Metro 2040 designation town centers for land use, improving the layout of light rail facilities for walking, biking, and development, attracting private investment into transit stations and around transit stations sooner than would otherwise occur, and increasing transit ridership. The Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project, its design process has advanced to a point where the city and TriMet can work together to develop transit-oriented strategies that will inform light rail station planning up to the phase we're heading into now, which is 60% design, which is a major design milestone. So we're trying to develop this strategy in advance of that phase of the light rail planning. The goal of our TOD strategy would be to create the conditions around each station that supports private development in order to achieve the city's land use vision for the Tigard Town Center and stations that are south of the Triangle and downtown. We have several phases to this project. Let me enumerate 4 or 5 of them that are in key phases. Mapping and creating an urban design framework for each station area. Developing TOD code amendments for future adoption. Adjusting TriMet's Southwest Corridor station area layouts and designs as needed to optimize those investments to encourage private investment that results in transit-oriented development. What else? Developing the partnerships, the programs, and the policies that result in transit-oriented development on opening day of the Southwest Corridor, and ensuring that we have adequate TOD capacity for longer term development after opening day. So Tigard has a TOD team that's led by Kenny Asher from Community Development, Tom McGuire, Susan Shanks, and we have 2 consultants we're working with. I'm also on the team. But we will meet with TriMet's TOD team tomorrow to finalize and we hope confirm a joint work plan. So this is your introduction to transit-oriented development. I expect as we progress, we will bring back news, progress, and some potential decisions for you. Susan's here in case you have questions from the planning perspective and the land use perspective, and she's the actual lead staff on this project. So now's a chance for you to ask questions about transit-oriented development or our work.
Just a note, I consider myself an honorary member of that team. I know I'm not.
Yes.
I know I've been at some of the more contentious meetings related to that, but anyway. Council questions, comments? Councilor Anderson?
So what role does TriMet have in this with you guys? Are they planning anything separate? Are they identifying lands for you? Speak on that.
I can answer that. Did you have a...
Yeah, well, I was just going to, I can start, and then Lloyd, maybe you and Susan can clean up. We are pushing them hard. I'm pushing them hard to make sure that this is not an afterthought, that this is done with purposeful planning and good coordination, and it is not acceptable to say that your transit-oriented development strategy is to just, at the end of the project, just say, okay, here are the remnant parcels. So we're trying to make sure that that's not the way it's approached, and I don't know what else you want to add, but.
I'll add, after one of the meetings that you were in attendance at with TriMet, after that meeting, we basically developed our proposal for what a TOD work plan would look like in partnership with TriMet, and that's what we're meeting with them about tomorrow. We've actually already seen some of their comments. They're workable, and so I think we're moving in a good direction in terms of actually partnering with them. And so, to answer your question, that we are actually bringing our team as well as some of our consultants on this project, as well as other projects where there's like overlap in the Triangle and downtown. And one of our proposals that they seem to have accepted, based on their comments so far, is that they have their existing staff members, but they also have existing consultants on board that they were using to just look at their remnant parcels, and now we're kind of expanding what we think their consultant role should be in this project. So we're kind of leveraging what they already had in place, and so far so good, but we'll have more to report after we meet with them tomorrow.
Other questions, comments? I will say that in that meeting there was there was commitment from the general manager at TriMet to partner with us on this. Now the question is, what does that look like in the details? Council President Goodhouse?
Not really a question, it's more of a comment that,
Go
and
for it.
especially what the mayor said. I mean, from the general manager, TriMet, going to conferences and talking about how important TOD is, or TOD is, and then for it to be an afterthought, it needs to be at the forefront, and we need to stay on that and say that, this is being preached all around the country or even up in Canada, and we need to follow through with that. You can't be going around and saying that this is so important, but then here in our area it's being an afterthought. It really needs to be something robust, and it needs to be developed around, and we need to actually stay on it and hold them to their words that they say they do.
I think we're making that happen through this process. You're not looking for any further direction. This is a briefing.
This is a briefing. I
Okay.
expect in the future, through the life of this project, over the next 12, maybe 16 months, if it stretches, that we will come back to you for requests for action and direction. This is an intro.
Okay.
Now,
Thank
if
you.
you wanted to, reference the map at all.
You do see before you the map that shows the potential 6 stations, the light rail stations in Tigard. And each of these has an opportunity to host some type of transit-oriented development that is more walkable, more mixed, more dense, more vertical. And these are all parts of the city where there's an opportunity for that to happen because of the nature of the existing urban form. Those, a good point Susan mentioned, that those circles are, I think, a quarter-mile radius around each of those stops, which is a very walkable extent. And part of this project will be to dive in deeper inside that quarter mile, and then also look outside of that quarter mile to see what do we expect and what is realistic for private and some public investment in each of these areas. Also marked on the map is the town center, both the Triangle and downtown Tigard.
Okay. Thank you very much on that subject. Do I see that the two of you are the presenters on the next item as well?
I think the next one, Mayor, is just me. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Purdy, could you pull the mic a little bit closer?
Yep.
so we
Have I
can
been too
help
quiet?
hear us better? Thanks.
Okay.
The volume of every mic tonight is pretty. Sorry, Caroline. I should have said that earlier. Okay. Item number 6: consider resolution approving the pursuit of funding a multi-use path over Highway 217 as part of the Southwest Corridor project.
Okay. Again, Lloyd Purdy, Economic Development for the City of Tigard. I can hear it now. The mic on now. Thanks. Tigard's November 2019 Memorandum of Understanding with TriMet for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail Project outlines a collaboration between the city and the transit agency for joint pursuit of grant funding for a bike and pedestrian crossing over Highway 217. This update includes, for your consideration, a resolution that directs the application process for future grant funding. I want now to tell you a little more about what it is we're seeking funding for. A multi-use path between the proposed Elmhurst Station in the Tigard Triangle and the Hall Boulevard Station here in downtown Tigard is a chance to connect residents and employees and even commuters to the two parts of the city's town center that are bifurcated and which are split by Highway 217. Downtown Tigard and the Tigard Triangle are also two areas of the city where we expect to see future development that is mixed, that is blended, that is more intense, more dense than anywhere else in the city. It's a place where we expect to see urbanization happen, along with the Southwest Corridor rail investment if that's approved. So the Highway 217 mixed-use path that we're trying to fund, unfortunately, is not actually a Southwest Corridor project. Its costs have not been included in the $2.6 billion plus or minus needed to build the light rail line. TriMet has asked the city of Tigard to secure this funding before they advance beyond the 60% design phase sometime in 2021. They have, of course, agreed to be joint partners in this pursuit of funding. So Tigard's community development and engineering staff have identified several potential funding sources, two of which I'll mention a couple tonight, two of which in particular we have some confidence that we should begin pursuit of. Metro has a 2019 regional park bond, and we think this is a promising opportunity because, in fact, the Highway 217 mixed-use path is actually the most complicated and probably the most expensive trail segment for the proposed and planned Red Rock Creek Trail. So it's not just a piece of a light rail transit infrastructure, it's also a critical part of a trail and may be eligible for this regional park bond funding. It also, of course, connects our city center, which is a Metro designated district, and we think it could be a good project, so we intend to pursue that. The federal U.S. Department of Transportation also has funding for transportation infrastructure through their BUILD, B-U-I-L-D program, and we think that might be a source of funding. Looking further ahead, but not quite in the timeline that Metro has set for a deadline to fund this project, we see programs like Metro's Regional Flexible Funds and ODOT's Connect Oregon program, both of which are programs we've tapped into before to fund infrastructure. Traditionally, funding from regional, federal, and state partners requires authorization from council. And this resolution that I'm asking you to consider begins that process. So I'm happy now to answer any more questions about the types of funding we could and should pursue, or the type of project, this mixed-use path that we're proposing.
So I'll just make an opening comment that I think it's critical that we get multimodal transportation on this connection as the Southwest Corridor is built. I think it's a huge lost opportunity to not have, at least at a minimum, pedestrian and bicycle connections on there. But with that, I will open it up to council comments or discussion. Councilor Lube?
I just want to make a comment that I'm appreciative that we're looking at this so holistically and so much looking forward and taking care of these things now rather than after the fact, that we're paying attention and we're making smart decisions strategically for the long term, because I'm in agreement where I think this is an opportunity for us to continue to look at alternative modes of transportation, and there are connections that are really hard to make, and that's a hard place to get over, 217. And so I think that would provide a lot of relief for people trying to find alternative routes. So I'm excited that we're looking for alternative ways to fund it.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yeah, I'm glad this is being worked on. It's quite the pain to get it in the MOU. And talking to the, TriMet wasn't wildly too happy about wanting this in there. Kept pushing for it, and finally said, "Well, we'll put it in there, but you guys figure it out." So, but talking to the different committees with TTAC, with both the Town Center Advisory Committee and also the Transportation, both of those committees, and also with the Bike Ped subcommittees, are really. As soon as I heard that, they said, "This is a no-brainer." I said, what do you mean there's a possibility of building it without bike and ped? That's just ridiculous. And that's exactly what the residents would say. So this is definitely supportive, and definitely we have to move forward on it, because I'd hate to build it and afterwards say, well, why didn't you put that on there? It connects areas. And let us know what we can do when we go back to DC this coming week, if there's anyone we should talk to or anything. If you can maybe print something up on this, because I know I have some meetings I'll be going to with the transportation committees that I could probably hand some information off into department heads out there. So if you could get me something up, that'd be great.
Councilor Newton?
Yeah, just so I can understand this, Mr. Purdy. So one of the whereases says that we have agreed in an MOU to jointly pursue grant funding. And then further down, it looks like subsequent to the MOU, TriMet has asked to secure funding commitments, which I'm reading take the lead. So, and then down at the bottom it says we approve a collaboration with TriMet in pursuit of funding. So we're taking the lead, but they're supporting. Is that how this works?
I think it's going to, Councilwoman Newton, I think that will vary based on the source of grant funding.
Okay.
For instance, on the federal build grant opportunity, it makes sense for TriMet to be the lead agency in name,
okay.
Because it'll be federal funds, and they're used to dealing with federal funds. Whereas in dealing with the Metro funding opportunity, it makes as much sense for us to be the lead. Either way, there's work for us to do with them, and that's what we're looking for in this resolution, is confirmation that we should be doing this jointly.
Okay.
So,
and the other message from them is show us the money, right? Because they're
that's what they're asking. I think what they are certainly committing to is not funding this project without some other source of funding. That's what they're.
But they'll help us.
They'll lend their name and support and clout and when we're needed. But if we find the avenue, then they'll help us once we find the avenue where the money can come from.
That's what the MOU implies.
Yeah.
And that's the good faith approach I'm starting to pursue.
And that's essentially what we're saying. Well, I definitely support the project. I was just trying to navigate how this was working. Thank you.
Councilor Turley? Anything else? Okay. Is there
I move to approve resolution number 20-10.
I'll second.
It's I've moved and seconded. Any further discussion? City Recorder, please read the number and
Resolution 20-10, a resolution approving the pursuit of funding a multi-use path over Highway 217 as part of the Southwest Corridor project.
all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, resolution number 20-10 is adopted unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Purdy. Next item on the agenda, consider updating the Tigard Community Development Code to support the 72nd Avenue plan findings. Engineer Enlow, good to see you.
Your mic isn't on. Sorry, thanks.
Good evening. So thank you for having me here tonight. I am Tegan Enlow from the engineering group here, and I am excited to talk to you all today about a project that our department has been working on for a while. It is the 72nd Avenue Transportation Study. I'm going to go through what the project was about and what our findings were, and at the end of the presentation, the question that I'm going to put forth to you all is whether or not you would like to direct staff to start work on code amendments to support the findings of the project. So the 72nd Avenue project was one that we put together because we found that we had a conflict between different adopted documents within the city. So the transportation system plan, which is what we currently require any sort of development on 72nd to build to, had 72nd identified as a 5-lane cross-section. So it was designed to carry a lot of vehicle movements and throughput. It was designed to be for an area that was going to have a lot of traffic to it. And when we look at that in contrast to some planning work that was later done for the Tigard Triangle, the Tigard Triangle planning work re-envisioned 72nd as something that was going to be a lot more multimodal focused. It was going to be a 3-lane cross section, so it was narrowing the crossing distance for pedestrians. It was going to have a lot of bicycle amenities. And so those two visions were really in conflict with each other, and that led to a lot of discrepancies in terms of what are we going to actually build out there. So the goal of this project, or the purpose of it, was to try and merge those two concepts to really find a way to create a 72nd Avenue and a cross-section that would support that community as a whole. So people living and working within walking distance to small shops, restaurants, and parks. So the goals of the project, we wanted to define the roadway cross-section, look at different intersection conceptual designs, make sure the project was going to support multimodal needs, so not just vehicles, not just bikes, not just peds, not just transit, but all of those different options for people to travel to and from and throughout the Tigard Triangle on 72nd. We wanted to talk about amenities, so what kind of lighting and trees and furniture we were going to have on the sidewalks, things like benches. We wanted to create an implementation plan, and we wanted to make sure that whatever this cross-section looked like was really going to be something that supported planned development and growth in the Tigard Triangle. We did a very robust amount of engagement with the community to make sure that we really understood what people in Tigard wanted to see for 72nd. The feedback that we received was that people really wanted to have a protected bike lane. Protected meaning it would have some sort of physical barrier or separation from vehicles. An example would be a cycle track that's typically raised, and that would create an opportunity for people to bike, even if they weren't maybe the more adventurous cyclists, but people who were out with their families and things. A lot of interest in sidewalks, obviously, for creating a walkable community. More pedestrian crossing opportunities was something that we heard a lot. People wanted to feel like they could get from one side of 72nd to the other, so maybe they live on one side, but they want to go to the grocery store on the other side. They wanted to make sure that there were opportunities for them to get to and from. We actually heard a lot of interest in maintaining on-street parking. That has a lot to do with the fact that the code for the Tigard Triangle is not requiring any off-street parking, which is good when you look at things like affordable housing, because that allows for more of the land to be used to develop residence areas and keep the cost down. But so when we would meet with people, they would say, we really want to make sure that there's on-street parking provided as well so that people can visit folks that are living there, they can visit the shops. So that was something that we heard from a lot of the people that were developing there. Requests for planters in landscaped areas, benches, trash and recycling and pet waste receptacles. And then when we talked to the community, we had a lot of mixed feedback about whether or not they wanted to see a 3-lane or a 5-lane cross section. So what we ended up with is actually 5 unique cross sections through the project study area, which I probably should have mentioned earlier is Highway 99 to 217. So it's not the entire length of 72nd, it's really focused in the triangle. So we have cross sections that vary by the area, and what we tried to do was make sure that in areas where we needed more capacity for vehicles, we made it wider, but in areas where we didn't need as much, we really made sure that we trimmed it down as narrow as we could to make it easier for the pedestrians to cross. And we also made sure we provided really good bicycle and pedestrian accommodations through all the different cross sections. We prioritized pedestrian and bicycle movements, and we also made sure that we took into account where we thought there might be future bus connections. We reached out to TriMet and asked, questions like, do you like bus stops before the intersection or after the intersection? Would you ever see transit down here aside from Southwest Corridor? Would you consider having a bus option as well? All of that to design what we have now. So the first thing I want to show you is the pedestrian crossing opportunities. So if you look at this, this is the project study area. It also shows the planned roadway connections. So you have it at Clinton, at Baylor, Atlanta. We have the existing signals that are out there, and then we have where we're proposing to have a traffic signal, because that would represent a controlled crossing for pedestrians. They could press a button and traffic would stop and they could cross. We also identified a hawk signal, which is kind of like a half traffic signal. It's you push a button and the cars would get a red light to stop so that the pedestrians could cross. And we're recommending one of those at Gonzaga. We felt like that was as close as we could get to 217 without having just so much going on that it wouldn't be safe to have it any closer. But so that would give us another crossing opportunity down there. We were proposing a signal at Elmhurst, which we thought was really important, particularly given the development with Southwest Corridor. We think there'll be a lot of pedestrian and bicycle demand there as a crossing movement. We are proposing an RRFB, which is that rapid flashing beacon you see between Clinton and Baylor, as another crossing opportunity. And then we want to have some sort of enhanced crossing wherever the Red Rock Creek Trail connection comes through, and we haven't really defined exactly what that looks like because there needs to be some planning done with the trail for it. But we have identified that we want to have more of an enhanced crossing there as well. So with all of those combined, there's actually quite a few crossing options that would be part of this area, and we think that that would be really helpful for folks, and it was very well received at all the public open houses. So the first cross section we have is Pacific Highway to where Red Rock Creek is. This is the narrowest of the cross sections, so we do have sidewalk, we have a 6-foot bike lane, planter strip, and then we have an 11-foot travel lane in each direction. When we were looking at the data, and we actually did what's called an origin destination study with Bluetooth readers, we actually looked at how people traveled through the Tiger Triangle, and we saw that a large amount of people come between Dartmouth and 217, and then they go east and west on Dartmouth, so the amount of traffic that's north of there is very it's reduced. It's a lot smaller than the rest of the area, and so this is going to represent where we have the smallest width in the study area. From Red Rock Creek to Dartmouth, we still have one traveling in each direction, but we added a 12-foot two-way left turn lane in the middle to allow people to access different businesses and properties. We have an on-street parking lane that can also become wider where we have needs for bus and transit stops. We have landscape area, we have a cycle track, and we have sidewalk. And then from Dartmouth to Beveland, we have a a travel lane in each direction, the two-way left turn lane. We have a cycle track, sidewalk, landscape strip, and then we also have a parking lane that can also be used as a driving lane. So this is an area where we found that we had a lot of demand for the AM and the PM peak hours in terms of needing to get vehicles through to make the system function well. But during the rest of the time, we didn't want it to be unnecessarily wide. And so we're designing it in a way, hopefully, that during times when there's not as much demand, it will have cars parked there so that it has that smaller feel and is more walkable, and it provides parking for businesses that need them. So it's sort of our hybrid. It allows us to do both. And then from Bevlin to Gonzaga, we have 2 lanes in each direction, the two-way left turn lane, cycle track, sidewalk, and landscape strip. And then same thing for 217 to Gonzaga. We've got the two-way left turn lane, 2 travel lanes, and the sidewalk and the cycle track. So what we're interested in hearing from you all tonight is the next step in terms of progressing with the project would be to amend the development code so that we could start requiring people to, when they develop in the Tiger Triangle, to build these specific cross sections. Right now, anything that's coming through our doors is being required to build what's in the adopted TSP, which is a 5-lane cross section the entire way through. It's got different types of bicycle and pedestrian treatments. And there's a lot of interest in developing in the Tiger Triangle right now, specifically along 72nd. And so if this is a vision that you guys are supportive of and are comfortable with the direction that we've gone, amending the code to reflect this would allow us to start implementing it sooner. So with that, if you guys have any questions or feedback or thoughts, I would be happy to answer and discuss.
So I think Council President Goodhouse and I have both seen this, at least one version of this presentation, so I'll go to other council members. Councilor Newton.
Thanks. A lot of good work, and this is well thought out. I have a question. We're talking about amending the Community Development Code. What about the TSP?
So the TSP is going through an update right now, but I believe I'm gonna tag Susan because she.
It might be broad enough that this is allowed, but.
I'm gonna bring my planning friend up to talk about how we implement things from a planning standpoint.
So Dave Roth, our senior transportation planner, is putting together a project to do a TSP update. And I was just talking about the schedule with him today, and that hopefully will be getting off the ground in May of this year, May or June, and then go through next year as well. And the way it would work in terms of being able to implement this cross-section with developers, we actually need it in the code more than we need it in the TSP. And we might do small tweaks to the TSP that'd be easy to do even before the update, but honestly, and City Attorney Rahela can speak to this better than I can, but there's been at least one court case where we don't necessarily want to have our code point out to like a comp plan like document, and the TSP is a comprehensive plan document. So it's actually better to have it in the code, and if there's some discrepancy with the TSP, the code would roll. You're welcome.
Others? Council President Goodhouse.
Just one quick question. I was looking at just trying to look at an aerial view. With it going from 4 lanes onto the bridge over 217, is there, how many lanes are on there, and will that accommodate it, or is that going to create a bottleneck down there? Is there any plan then with the bridge? And then I know when you get right there about at the top of Hunziker, that can be a little dicey as well as far as backing up. So how is that going to flow into that area?
That's a really good question. So one of the things that we had to make a decision about early on is, you're absolutely right, the 217 overpass is a bottleneck today. And if we were to, we could either run the project assuming it was going to stay that way, which would impact sort of what our cross-section looked like because it would feed into it. Or the other option, which is the one that we chose to move forward with, is we sort of opened up the bridge and said, just assuming the bridge works fine, what would we want to build our portion to look like in order for it to function in the best way that it can and the way we want it to? because we're looking at this as a longer term project. You know, it's going to be put together as development occurs. You know, at some point, you know, maybe we come back in with our own project and take care of some things sometime far out into the future. And so as of right now, the study that we did looked at it assuming that the bridge would at some point be expanded and would no longer be a bottleneck. Now, that's not anything ODOT has committed to, and it would involve probably another project with them to look at the interchange as itself. But we were concerned if we just assumed that it stayed as its own bottleneck, that would negatively impact what we designed our portion to look like and what we wanted it to look like. So if this were to be built and the bridge were not fixed, there would still be some bottlenecking that happens there, and it would not operate as wonderfully as all the stuff that we looked at. This would still be an improvement, but it would still feel the effects of that. I think that ultimately the best option would be to, at some point, start conversations with ODOT about potentially looking at the interchange as well.
I mean, at some point, that intersection or that bridge is going to have to be addressed. It may not be now, it may not be 10 years from now, but it will be someday.
Yeah. And I prefer building it that way, where you build on what you want it to be rather than what's there and then you restain, but then later on, I like being able to open that up. So I prefer that way, being thinking forward.
Yeah, bridges only last so long, so at some point it'll have to be replaced. I guess it's just a matter of whether or not we get them to do it before then.
Councilor Anderson, did you have?
Yeah, I just say I approve that the staff proceed. What's the actual mechanics of that? Do you take it to the planning commission? Do you guys do it yourself?
It'd be the standard legislative process for a code amendment. We'd be looking to essentially come back to you with code amendments to the Tiger Triangle Plan District chapter in the development code. And you know, you think just adding a couple cross sections would be just that, but actually because of the different references within the chapter, there'll be small changes kind of throughout relative to driveways. Because what we did when we wrote the Tiger Triangle Lien Code, which is the Plan District chapter, is we punted on 72nd, and so we just would have to go back in and unpunt and make all the necessary changes to make it all work together. So it would be a code amendment project that would go first to the Planning Commission with all the required notices, and then come to you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
I support the unpunting. Others? Councilor Lube?
I'm excited to see this. I, drive it fairly regularly, and it's a tough area to get through, but it's also unfriendly to anybody who's not in a car. And so seeing this really opens it up for the transportation, regardless of how people want to get around. It's going to be much more friendly. And I'm always excited to see the protected bike lanes, because as a cyclist, it's super scary sometimes to drive on the road and have cars buzz by you. And so it just encourages those other modes of transportation. And it's very forward-looking, and I think this is the way that we need to plan our community, to plan for all of those different types of transportation and ways that everyone needs to get around. So I'm really excited to see these changes, even though it may take a little while, but I think this is great.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
The best time to start is now.
Yeah.
Other comments, or do you feel like you have the direction you need? Okay.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is that we should start working on amending the code.
Yes.
And then come back when we're working on that process for you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next item on the agenda is item number 8, resolution authorizing the sale of general obligation refunding bonds. Mr. LaFrance. And if you could work the word unpunting into this talk, that'd be great.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Toby LaFrance, Finance and Information Services Director. Here before you, asking that Council approve a resolution to authorize the sale of some general obligation refunding bonds. Want to give a little bit of background for you this evening. It's a somewhat complicated mechanism that we're going through. I tried to hit the high points, and then I'm available to answer any questions. So. Oh, wrong way. Okay, there we go. All right, a little bit of background. Currently, Tigard has 2 voter-approved general obligation, or GO, bonds. One's for the library and one's for the parks. So the one that's for the library will be we'll be done paying that in about 3 more years. The parks, we've got about another 10, 11 years to go. And what a GO bond means is that the city is going to use its taxing authority to repay this debt. So a city can actually issue GO bond just using its existing property tax authority that we use for our operations and instead use it to pay debt. But as you know, Tigard has a very low property tax rate to help run our operations, and we're having difficulties being able to maintain our service levels there. So Tigard has not issued any general obligation debt off of its existing taxing authority. Instead, what we've done is voter approved. We've gone to the voters, we've said we need to have this capital investment. We would like you to pay more in property taxes to repay this debt over and above what you're paying currently, and that property tax will go solely to repaying the debt. So we currently have two such general obligation bonds have been voted on by Tigard residents. So pros and cons of restructuring, and I'm going to be hitting some of these points in a little bit more detail in the following slides. Essentially what the restructuring is, it's similar to if you currently have 20 years left on your mortgage and you want to get a 15-year mortgage. In doing so, you're going to shorten the overall time period at which you are repaying your mortgage debt. The amount of your mortgage, the value of your house, stays the same. The benefit is you pay less in interest because there's less interest accruing since it's over a shorter period of time. However, in order to make those payments over 15 years, you wind up paying a little bit more each month on your monthly mortgage payment. What we're going to be talking about here tonight is very similar. We're going to be talking about taking the tail end of our payments on our existing debt, so that would be on the parks part that goes out to 2031, and front loading it in. So, pros of doing so. Tigard will save about $1.4 million in interest payments by restructuring this debt. And since our debt is repaid by of Tigard residents, that saving goes directly to property owners. So through the end of our debt that we currently have, which goes through fiscal year 2031, the typical home would save $82 in total over the life of the debt that we currently have. In addition, another pro would be that we will secure our current property tax rate for any potential future facility needs. The con is in the short term. You have to pay a little bit more. And so, and I'll be showing this, but for the next 5 years, 6 years, that same property owner would pay about $182 more. So currently, with our current debt service, the graph that's up in front of you, the gray bars are the annual payments for our parks bond. The orange bars on top of that are our annual payments for the library. So currently we're paying somewhere around $2.2 million in general obligation debt. About 1.25 of that is for the parks, and a little over 900,000 of that's for the library. Each one of those pieces of debt have a level debt service. It means we pay the same amount every year. And what that means is citywide, as the citywide assessed value increases, which under state law, it increases 3% per year, plus there's any new construction that gets added into that. So as the citywide assessed value increases in the city of Tigard, if you've got increasing assessed value in a level debt service, the rate to collect that level amount goes down each year. So what you see there, that represented is the blue line in the graph. So currently, Tigard ratepayers are paying about 33.85 cents per thousand of assessed value. By the time that we're retiring the library bonds, it'll be down around 30 cents. So it'll be somewhere between 3 to 4 cents less per thousand of assessed value on their home. So restructuring. What we do here is you still see the parks in gray, library in orange, but we've taken the tail end of the parks and we've front-loaded it. And that's what you see in the green bars stacked on top in your graph. So now instead of our bonds expiring in 2031, they're going to expire in 2026. We're going to have increasing annual payments that will mirror the increase in the assessed value of the city of Tigard. And the result is that you'll have a level rate. So our rate will stay somewhere around the 33.85 cents per thousand that property taxpayers are paying today. So when you've seen this slide a few times when we were talking about the levy. So the typical home. So I want to talk about what is the impact of this restructure on the typical home in Tigard. And as we've talked about, the difference between assessed value and real market value is assessed value is about 2/3 of the real market value of a house in Tigard. And that the property taxes are based upon the assessed value. So what we have here is a comparison. In the graph, we have the current bond property tax that a home would pay over between now and 2031. In the gray, we show what that same home would pay with restructured debt. So what it means is that the home will pay a little bit more each year between now and 2026. And that is especially true those last 3 years when the library bond would have been retired and we would have just been paying for the parks. And that combined over that 6-year period, total is an extra $182. However, now that home doesn't have to pay the debt for the last 5 years because that parks bond has been restructured. And so what that means is over the full length of time between now and 2031, that same home's going to pay $82 less than they would have otherwise. So pros and cons. If you're a property owner and you're thinking of moving away from the city of Tigard sometime between now and 2026, by us restructuring bonds, you're going to pay a little bit more on your property taxes than you would have otherwise. However, if that property owner stays in the city of Tigard through 2031, they're going to pay less. So just want to make sure you see both the pros and the cons. Overall, the city of Tigard will pay less in the interest payments by restructuring, again, about $1.4 million. A property will pay, regardless of who owns that property during this period of time, a single typical property will pay about $82 less by restructuring the debt, and will be able to secure the current property tax rate for debt by restructuring today. So those are kind of the basics. I'm here to answer any questions.
Councillor Newton?
Absolutely.
So it looks like I just did quick math on my phone. It looks like over the 6 years it would be about $2.50 more a month, about $30 a year. If it's 182 over 6 years.
182 over 6 years. However,
more.
If you look at the graph, in the first 3 years, you're only paying a tiny bit more, a few dollars.
Okay.
Where the bulk of that 182 happens is in fiscal years 24,
Later,
25, and 26.
So to start with, you're not paying much more.
No.
And at some point, we could do that calculation for people, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
And
Councillor Loop?
that $182, is that based off of the difference between what they would have been paying with just the parks bond versus what they would be paying with the restructured? So even though, since they're used to paying, let's just use $100, they're used to paying $100, but they would be dropped down to say $50. Since they're still paying that $100, that additional $50, is that included in the 182?
Yeah, so I think this answers your question. If you look at fiscal years 27 through 31, that property owner is paying about $50 a year.
Yeah.
And that is because if we don't restructure, we'll still be paying on the parks bond.
Right.
If we do restructure, there's no property tax payment. So that's $50 a year saved. And over 5 years, that's about $250 in property tax payments that property owner will not pay by us restructuring. So that more than offsets the additional payments that are being made in the 6 years, in the first 6 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Councilor Anderson?
So does this GEO bond interest rate work similar to like a refinance? Do we get a better rate?
I've been careful not to say that that's a potential benefit. It's quite likely it's a potential benefit, especially today with the Fed announcing an additional 0.5% decrease. So it's entirely possible that the numbers that are in front of you for the restructuring are conservative. That said, I don't want to count on it because there's work I have to do with our financial advisors and our bond counsel between now and end of April to make this happen.
You can't promise it.
And I can't promise it.
Yep. Good enough.
It's entirely possible, though.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Okay, I might need help asking this question. So if we, if the library bond expired and we just took the difference, you know, we let it expire and then we kept that, what kind of numbers would we be talking about there? You know what I mean? If we just kept going where we are now, so people aren't paying more, we're just, am I making sense?
Well, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right, but we did the restructure, but we just kind of refinanced the library bond. Am I making sense? So the time would be out to the wouldn't change. I mean,
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And are you talking about taking the library bond and stretching it?
And just making that go longer
Making that
to
go
how
longer.
some finite period.
That's not something I've looked into.
Okay.
My head, if we did that, that's something that I would need to check with our bond counsel to see if we could stretch out.
I mean, we'd have to have a
bond.
voter.
It depended on what was in the actual ballot measure.
Yeah.
If we
No,
said
I
a
mean, we went
20-year
out to the voters again and said, you're going to pay the same amount, but now we're going to have a new bond and it's going to be for facilities.
Okay.
The restructuring you're proposing doesn't require a vote right now.
Yeah,
Correct.
This is
Okay.
the first step. We
Okay.
absolutely, if we want to do, in the pros, talked about a potential for, you know, if we decide as a city to go out for a potential facility, this puts us in a better position to do
Okay.
so.
Okay, I understand.
But
Thanks.
on what she was hinting on Councilor Newton, you can't really extend the existing library bond. You can't.
not without
I would need to check with our
Yeah.
Yeah.
bond counsel. We can shorten.
Probably not.
We can shorten, which is what we're doing here on the park side. I don't know if we can lengthen.
It'd be similar to getting a 30-year mortgage and saying, can I make it a 35? And they're like,
Right.
no, you signed a 30.
I was assuming we'd go out for a vote and
Okay.
say your
Gotcha.
bond's expired, we're going to go out for another vote and have
Yes.
same amount of money, your property taxes aren't going to go up, it's what they're going to raise, what you're paying.
And this puts us in a better position to do that because that rate's been protected by the action that's recommended this evening.
Okay, other questions or a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 20-11.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Deputy City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Resolution 20-11, a resolution authorizing the sale of general obligation refunding bonds.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution number 20-11 passes unanimously. Thank you for your work on that. Really good, detailed information, and I think a good story to help explain it. So thank you.
And it's always good to save the voters $1.4 million.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we have no non-agenda items. Administrative report. City Manager Wine?
Yes, Mayor and Council, my only administrative report item is, I feel like it's timely to mention, like everybody, the city is watching the coronavirus incident carefully, at home here and globally. So I've been asked by folks at on staff and in the public what the city is doing to either respond or be prepared for the coronavirus should it I'll just say, come nearer to where we are. Although we have a small number of places, we're doing the same as all of our neighbors and local jurisdictions, and we're monitoring the Oregon Health Authority website. They're in the lead with their response and advice to jurisdictions, to everybody, about precautions to take. As you've heard probably countless times over the last few days, the health officials are saying that good hand hygiene, covering coughs, and staying home if you're sick are the precautions that we should be taking. So the city is doing the same. A few weeks ago, we stepped up our cleanings of our countertops and surfaces in places where the public is circulating and meeting with us. We have emergency operation plans that include our hazard-specific annexes, including for public health, and those are in place, and if action's required, then we'll be activating those plans. Let's see, we don't have any service impacts at this point beyond the precautions that you've heard about, but our plans put us in a position, such as with our court and with library and with some of the other services that have lots of public interaction, so that if we need to take steps, we can make changes to services depending on whatever comes our way. So I think that's all I have to say, just to mention it to you, and that we'll be ready and our plans are in place for whatever the next steps are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really quick, the Commander Rogers and Commander McDonald were at the community roundtable this morning and gave an update, and it sounded to me like they've really thought through, in particular, court and how we would respond to that, giving people other options besides coming in, and encouraging people that are sick not to come, and giving them really clear direction about how to handle that. So that was good to hear.
Right. I mean, I think it's worth thinking about the variety of services that the city provides, and where court and folks at our public counters might have, specific options for the way our customers would interact with us. We're also thinking about the future as it relates to, let's just say, the library. Even right now, patrons and I'll just say our employees across all of our services are asking, what are the options to either work remotely, or are there ways to be protective of the public in the way they're working in the library with the public? And also, if in the future we end up with school closures or effects elsewhere in the community, thinking about how we can remain open and still also meet whatever precautions are being indicated at that time. So we're trying to be thoughtful across all of our services about what we might need to do, depending on what comes our way next.
Anything
Thanks.
further on that? All right, our next item on the agenda is an executive session. The Tigard City Council will go into executive session to review a public official under ORS 192.660 subsection 2I. All discussions are confidential, and those present may disclose nothing from the session. Representatives of the news media are allowed to attend executive sessions as provided by ORS 192.660 subsection 4, but must not disclose any information discussed. No executive session may be held for the purpose of taking any final action or making any final decision. The City Council will adjourn from the Red Rock Creek Conference Room at the conclusion of the executive session.